And here we go on a busy Monday. Right on top of it, he is Caleb Calhoun. I am Dave Hooker. So get on board now because we've got a show full of Tennessee recruiting news. Look back at the hiring of Joey Halzle, and also we're going to talk some college football playoff championship game. They need to work on that. Let's just call it the CFP. Can we officially change that, Caleb?
Yeah, I'm with you. But see, is it CFP or CFBP?
Well, that's a good point. See, now you've made it ultra complicated. So a lot to get to on the program today, and you're certainly more than welcome to join us. We greatly appreciate that on our chat board. And I'm curious as much as anything, who are you rooting for tonight? As it will be TCU and Georgia. So let's look at this and how it might affect the Vols, first of all, Caleb. And I think it's natural to say you want Georgia to lose, you want them to come back to the pack a little bit, and I think we can look at that and we can have that discussion. But I've also said that typically you want to root for the conference. Now, that may be antiquated because nowadays there's just basically two conferences in the Big Ten and the Pac 12, or excuse me, the SEC. The Pac 12's long forgotten. So when I look at the SEC, I think they already have a dominant position. So I used to say root for the SEC. It makes the conference look better. To me, they're in this catbird seat anyway. So it doesn't hurt to root against SEC teams. It doesn't hurt if they falter whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, conference pride is that's a 30-year-old. I honestly think conference pride was on its way out the minute the BCS started, and then it was dead with the college football playoff. Because the point of conference pride, I always felt was, look, for the first 100 years of college football, the national champion was based on what poll voters determined. And you wanted your conference to have a certain level of prestige. So you could say, we deserve to be number one if you're competing for the national championship at the end of the year based on the conference you played in. Well, I mean, AP and coaches poll had a little bit of a say in the BCS. Don't get me wrong. Actually, their say increased after 2003. But then the college football playoff started. And I think that, yeah, I think conference pride pretty much died by the wayside, particularly if you're in the SEC or the Big Ten at that point. And so I'm with you. I think it's much better for Tennessee if Georgia loses. I think that, it's Tennessee's going to have their first top 10 finish since 2001 at the end of this year. 2001 was Mark Richt's first year at Georgia. It's not a coincidence that Tennessee fell off as Georgia started to emerge again under Mark Richt for the first time post Vince Dooley. I mean, Tennessee really benefited from Georgia being a laughingstock program between Vince Dooley and Mark Richt.
Yeah, absolutely. Dean says, is all well at OTH. You know it. Take a week off to reboot the show a little bit and wanted to move times into the 10 o'clock hour. So that's where we'll be with you at 10 o'clock, Dean. We appreciate that. You're my go-to place for all things UT football. So we're going to take care of you right here and there. So be sure and hit that like button, click the thumbs up. We greatly appreciate it. And if you're not subscribed, I know Dean is, but be sure and hit the subscribe button, hit another mile mark on that. So happy that we've had the response that we have. Check out offthehooksports.com for the 3 announcements that are coming today, and we'll have a breakdown of those on the show a little bit later. So as far as Tennessee in the college football playoff, I think there was the common theme heading into the semifinal round that there were going to be 2 blowouts and another blowout, and at least Georgia was going to blow somebody out. When you went into the college football playoff and you had them at number 1, no matter who they played, I think we all thought they were going to dish out, hey, we're headed right to the finals, sort of serving to whoever they played. But that wasn't the case. Both of the games were incredibly close. They were incredibly fantastic. It makes me like the college football playoff, so click that like button. But I really believe that not necessarily that Georgia's come to the pack, but I do believe, based off what I saw on that Saturday with 2 teams, that Georgia is not nearly as elite as they were last year, and that there were some other teams that could stand toe-to-toe with the Bulldogs. Now, I certainly understand the motivation behind Ohio State and what they wanted to do. I think Ohio State made a big mistake. I think Michigan made a big mistake as well. But we're talking about this as if 4 teams are pretty much on the equal plane or close to equal plane. Are they? And with that question asked, Caleb, how well would Tennessee have done in the college football playoff?
Um, well, if you break down recruiting and talent, Ohio State is probably one of the teams that's closest to Georgia on an equal playing field. So it was theoretically possible to see them competing with Georgia the way they did, particularly when you said this earlier in the year when we were covering the season that Georgia's a team that just turns it off and on, as they feel like it pretty much. And you're right, they're not as good as they were last year. I think the parity is actually going to get more substantial in the coming years. Funny enough, I think overall Georgia is still like quite a few notches talent wise above most teams. I think Tennessee could have competed in the college football playoff because of what we saw, but I think if Georgia was fully focused Georgia, we saw what they did to Tennessee earlier this year. That game was not as close as 27-13 indicated. That game was a blowout that Georgia was nice to make it 27-13. And but I think in the future that's going to change. I think NIL money, we keep talking about how the NIL is such a factor with which schools have the most. I don't think that's going to be that big as big of a factor. I think it does help Tennessee. But I think the big thing with NIL is it's going to have smaller urban, let's say Division One, lesser tier schools with in big cities with elite athletes might lure those athletes to stay home now. With with some of the business leaders in those communities. I think of a school like Memphis, Memphis football, where Tennessee or Georgia or Alabama would go in and get the best players out of that city. And I think FedEx might just throw a ton of money at them to stay home and go play football for Memphis. And I actually think that NIL is going to create more parity in the future than we
Certainly.
have right now.
Yeah, certainly could see that because you don't have prospects or players that are sitting on the bench for 2 and 3 years. Now, I do believe that Alabama and Georgia are going to follow in this mold that players are going to be willing to sit there for a year or two because of what they see based on the history of players going on to the NFL. And I think a running back's very wise to sit out at Alabama for a year or two, knowing that he'll have more tread on his tires, get to that second contract in the NFL. However, if a guy's Alvin Kamara is a great example. He was at Alabama. He was not suited there, be it the tough discipline or he didn't like being there, never really got to the bottom of that story. I think he was both asked to leave and wanted to leave. But there's a great example. Yeah, if he's sitting there, he did transfer, but there are a lot of guys that have sat through that have stayed at Alabama. Now, if you can go get $1 million, exactly like Alabama takes in the young man from Georgia Tech. If you can go make money, why would you not cruise off? Because now you can put your family in a financial position that they wouldn't be at if you sat there and waited on the NFL for 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. It's and you're right. It's not going to affect it's not like an either or feast or famine situation. It's not like Alabama and Georgia are going to just all of a sudden fall off the map because you're right. They're still going to have a certain number of players that they're still going to have a certain level of depth. But you're right. There will be some players that would have stayed that will now go to another school because of the $1 million that's offered at their hometown school or hometown program. And that's where you're going to start seeing the talent dispersed a little bit. And football is the game of injuries. And so, for the longest time, Alabama and Georgia has been this way recently. They can sustain injuries that NFL teams can't even sustain, given the level of depth and how much deeper they are than everybody else. And that's not going to happen in the future, I don't think. That doesn't, again, they're still going to be good. I think location and proximity to home for recruiting talent does matter. So I still think Georgia and LSU and Ohio State, I think those three schools, you can fall out of bed and get a top 5 recruiting class in those 3 schools.
So let me ask you this: Tennessee going into the college football playoff, how would they have fared, Caleb? That's a question I have for you because I'm not going to give you the opponent necessarily. I'm just going to say how would they have fared because they could play Georgia, they could have played TCU, Michigan, Ohio State. However you want to wrangle those all together. But let's say Tennessee's part of the mix. What are the chances that they would have advanced past the first round, not knowing the opponent? I know that's incredibly difficult, but your thoughts?
I think not knowing the opponent is a little difficult because I'm just going to say up front, I think they would have beaten Michigan, lost a close one to Georgia, and maybe lost a little significantly to TCU. Then that's a crazy thought, but we know what Tennessee's biggest Achilles heel was this past year, and it was the secondary.
Yep.
And TCU had the best quarterback in the college football playoff, bar none, I think. I think Max Duggan was better than CJ Stroud. And so I don't think Tennessee would have had any answer for him if they faced him. But I think they would have beaten Michigan, and I think they would have been in a close game with Georgia, because I don't think Georgia would have been as excited to play them having to play them a second time. And so I think Tennessee would have given them a bit of a game. Ohio State's a little tough because CJ Stroud is another elite quarterback, but they don't run an air raid like TCU runs. So I think Tennessee would have had a chance to wreak some havoc on Ohio State and make it an interesting game. That TCU was just a bad matchup for them. That would have been a horrible matchup.
True. And if you want to root for somebody tonight, Joe says Georgia winning does nothing to help UT. I'm gonna say a little bit. Maybe it does. If the SEC is trying to get the fourth team in that college football playoff, then I believe that can be helpful to say, hey, you've got last year's national champion there. The conference has dominated the postseason for a number of years. So I'm going to say it could help a little bit. But as a whole, you're right. I mean, Georgia, if they're hanging banners, I think it makes it tougher in recruiting to go into those places. As far as where Tennessee where they would have been had they been in the college football playoff, I'm gonna say this. I think they would have competed with either of the Big Ten schools, because especially if either of those Big Ten schools had the same coaching that they had in those semifinal games. I mean, that was just horrendous game management. I didn't like the way either approached that game. Now, TCU, I think that Tennessee, had they played TCU, that would have been one of those who has the ball last. I tend to agree with you that they probably wouldn't have beaten TCU. I think Georgia would have been incredibly close as well. And I know you look at that game and you say to yourself, man, that wasn't close. I watched that game, Dave, and the score didn't determine exactly the difference between those two teams. And I can roll with that, and I can agree with that. I gotcha. I saw what happened in Sanford Stadium in Athens. However, that was such a perfect mix of pregame hype that ended up going against the Vols with the crowd really, really into it. And then you have the other issue of the punt that is allowed to go and wasn't returned and goes inside the 1 yard line. And it's at the student section. I could see that game changing significantly if the first 5-7 minutes were kind of tit for tat, Caleb, instead of Tennessee finding themselves in a hole, that they were actually in the game. I could see that game changing a little bit, but it just seemed like everything went wrong too early for the Vols.
That's a good point. And let's also remember when they were trying to come back, it started raining. And I mean, you hate to throw that in, but I mean, doesn't Heupel's offense kind of depend a little bit on some decent weather?
True.
Because of the speed of the receivers?
True. And if you look at the Vanderbilt game, what did they do in the driving rain? They ran.
Right, exactly. And it reminds me of history here. 1992, Tennessee, Florida. You remember it, Dave. Heath Schuler's first start against Florida. The pouring rain that soaked Neyland Stadium. That was the reason Tennessee blew out Florida in that game. And it was really the game that made Fulmer a household name.
No, I agree. And now the other factor we haven't brought up that Elias did, he's talking about Milton. I do think Milton would maybe be a rough matchup with Georgia, but there's something to be said for giving Heupel's month to prep against a team he'd already seen. With Milton, good point. 2 good points, Elias Gray. Are we talking about Milton going into these college football playoffs? Or are we talking about the team that we watched all year challenge for the number and eventually secure the number 1 spot? Are we talking Hooker? Or are we talking Milton? Because I think Milton, there's still an awful lot of unknown. I would have to take the incomplete. I was assuming that we were talking about the Vols when they were rolling at number 1 and before the South Carolina game. So forgive me if I've jumped to assumptions there.
Yeah, that's still a question though, because Hooker, one thing we saw from Milton in this game in the Orange Bowl was Milton is better over the middle than Hooker is. Now Hooker has a way better deep ball, and I mean it's not even close. But How does that factor in against a Georgia team? Georgia would not have played the same soft zone coverage Clemson was playing over the middle to leave those. I mean, Georgia can play really, they can play tight man, they can drop linebackers and spy. It would have been a lot more difficult to complete passes over the middle against Georgia than it was against Clemson. But the fact that Hooker could do that would have maybe made Georgia be a little bit more honest on, because I mean they sold out to stopping Tennessee on the outside against Hooker. They went all out to make sure Hooker was not going to convert any deep balls, and they knew they had the corners to make sure that happened.
I think there were times they had 6 safeties over top. So yeah, they definitely did. And I agree with you there. So yeah, the other thing that Elias brought up, going back to his thought, is and I thought about this a lot over the December month and the Christmas break. So you have a situation, please hit that thumbs up button, guys. We greatly appreciate it. You have a situation in which Tennessee has a month to prepare, but you also have a situation in which the other team has a month to prepare. So this is kind of like the old wishbone or option challenge. You know, you remember Georgia Tech ran that for years, and nobody wanted to play Georgia Tech during the season. But when you have a month to prepare, it changed things considerably, Caleb. And I think it could change things one way or another. I'm not sure, though, if it doesn't help the opposing team when Tennessee plays them. I actually think you have more time to prepare for Tennessee. Now, that didn't prove true in the Orange Bowl, so I may look a little stupid. But when you have a game that matters and you have a team like a TCU, Michigan, Ohio State, had they had a month to prepare, who does that help, Caleb?
Yeah, I'm with you. That helps the other team, and we actually have some evidence of this because Josh Heupel was 1-2 in bowl games at UCF. He's 1-1 at Tennessee now, so he's 2-3 in bowl games as a head coach. His first bowl game as a head coach was that the year UCF went undefeated, repeated the Scott Frost undefeated season from the year before, and then they went and lost to LSU in the Fiesta Bowl. Now, if Ed Orgeron can beat you with a month to prepare, then anybody can. Now, yeah, LSU. Now, I understand people are going to jump in. LSU was so much more talented than that UCF team. UCF didn't have players that belonged on the same field, and I think the difference in this game is Clemson didn't really care to be there. I'm going to write about this week. I was going to write about it last week, and news got in front of us. But I just don't think Dabo, as a X's and O's guy, is really just smart enough to scheme for a guy like Heupel, even with a month to prepare. I don't. So I think a guy like Jim Harbaugh would have been. Sonny Dykes would have been. Ryan Day. You're on and off with Ryan Day. He runs a good system and has great recruits, but sometimes you wonder if that's just a product of what Urban Meyer continued there. But yeah, I mean, Jim Harbaugh with a month to prepare would easily figure out this system, I think. And so I agree. I think it helps the other team most of the time more than it helps Heupel.
I agree. Coming up, we're going to take a look at the 3 Tennessee transfer prospects that are set to announce their decision today, and it's impact guys. So Caleb Gyro will join us here momentarily from Off the Hook Sports. Always go to that website, and you can check out the latest on the Vols and also some great takes. Also, you've got Cooper and Jacob up there, which we'll continue to visit with, Cooper Mays and Jacob Warren. So a lot going on, brought to you in part by Zach England of Best and Brock. Zach's got your back. Zach England of Best and Brock, the best personal injury attorney in the Chattanooga area. He is absolutely fantastic. And I'll remind you, when it comes to your investments, you have got to go to GIAplantoday.com. Guardian Investment Advisors is absolutely phenomenal because they not only will place your money where it needs to be to put you in the best financial position, but they'll tell you why they're putting it there. That is Guardian Investment Advisors. Call the guys there. They're phenomenal. Back in 2 minutes with a breakdown of Tennessee recruiting off the Hook Sports.
Has risen to the highest level in over 40 years, according to the April 2022 U.S. Inflation Calculator. Will your investments provide you the income you need in retirement? Are you losing purchasing power of your savings due to inflation? Simply stated, if the cost of goods and services are 8% higher and you're only earning 4% in your investments, that money buys you less of what you need. Right now is the time to act. Call Guardian Investment Advisors today.
Hey folks, Gary Viles here. I want to personally invite you to North Knoxville's newest sports bar and restaurant. It's Big Orange Phillies, located in Black Oak Center. And yes folks, it's happening in Halls. Big Orange Phillies offers family-friendly environment with homemade meals and the best deli-style subs around. Billiards, darts, jukebox, shuffleboard, and cornhole, and a full bar. We also offer valet parking on weekends and during special events. We even have a covered back patio. It's happening at Big Orange Phillies. We want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Chattanooga, we're at it again. For the 5th year in a row, you voted us best of the best criminal and DUI law firm.
And finalists for best law firm and best personal injury firm.
Thank you for the love, Chattanooga. We won't let you down.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
All right, here we go. He's Caleb Calhoun. I am Dave Hooker, and we're going to bring in Caleb Gyro. Basically, if you got the first name Caleb, you will be hired by Off the Hook Sports. That's the way it works. So if there's any young guys out there that want to work, or gals, I guess Caleb could be a girl's name. I don't know. What do you guys think?
When I was very little, people used to call me Kayla because my preschool classmates would call me Kayla because they couldn't pronounce Caleb. So.
You are an absolute sweetheart. You are phenomenal. I love that. So go ahead and click that like button so we can get more people on board. I want to go to the message board. And by the way, Caleb, and it looks like I got an email. Caleb Calhoun, you can see the message board there, right? So I'm going to go to you to get some of these comments in before we get to this big day in Tennessee football recruiting and where Tennessee might land with 3 transfer prospects considering the portal. So they're considering coming to Tennessee, and there are some significant ones. So we'll go back and forth the message board, and Caleb Gyro is absolutely on top of recruiting at offthehooksports.com. So good morning, Gyro. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are y'all?
I'm well. Somehow it's a big Monday for Tennessee football, even though the college playoff championship is tonight. So just for the record, Gyro, we were discussing this earlier. How do you think Tennessee would have fit into a 4-team playoff? I'm not giving you the opponent, but how would they have done had they been in it after what you saw on New Year's Eve?
I really think it depends on what team shows up on both sides of the ball. So, like, if Tennessee was going against an Ohio State team at its best, I don't think they would beat them. But if they play maybe the Ohio State team or the Michigan team that showed up last Saturday, then they would probably beat those teams. And you also have to look at Tennessee and what Tennessee team shows up. Do we get the Tennessee that went to Columbia? Or do we get the Tennessee that played Alabama and Knoxville? So it really just comes down to what team shows up. And I feel like if Tennessee's at its best, they could probably beat the losers on Saturday, but I don't know if they could compete with TCU or Georgia. Basically, based on, I think Calhoun said it earlier, TCU has probably the best wide receiver in the country, and I don't think Tennessee could stop the 50th best wide receiver in the country. So
fair. Dean says, I don't think the Vols would have done well in the Natty this year, 1 or 2 years ahead of where we are. And that's true, but I would like for people to go to offthehooksports.com and read the column that I wrote. I like this new cocky, confident Tennessee fan. I do. And maybe it's a little bit ahead of the curve. Maybe it's not time to be that guy yet, or that gal, but I like it. I like the fan that says that, you could have hung with those teams. And I've said all along that with the Derek Dooleys, the Butch Jones of the world, they crowed about top 15, top 20 classes. The three of us could be a triumvirate of coaches and get a top 25 class at Tennessee. I think it's that strong of a pool. So, especially with NIL. So I like that Tennessee fans are confident. And I think Tennessee could play with either of these two teams. TCU would be a struggle because of the defensive backs, and I think that a game against Georgia would be a real game into the fourth quarter, which it wasn't. So, Gyro, what do we got going on in recruiting? 3 transfer portal guys. This used to be the time where high school kids would come in, but no longer. It's time to stake out college kids and grown men in the airport at Tyson McGee.
Yeah, really, if you want to throw in offensive tackle John Campbell out of Miami, we have 4 guys announcing today. So 4 o'clock will be a big hour, but we'll start with 1 o'clock, which is what I think will probably be the biggest news for Tennessee today. You have Dante Thornton out of Oregon. He's a 6'5", 200-pound wide receiver. And he lined up at Oregon in the slot at 6'5". So imagine Jalen Hyatt, but taller, same speed in Josh Heupel's offense. And that's basically what you would get out of Dante Thornton. His film looks amazing. And whenever he was interviewed in the airport, he said that he got along with Joey Halzle amazing. He went bowling with Josh Heupel and said he beat Josh Heupel in bowling. And he also met Joe Milton while he was here. So that's also another ripple into this. I guess Josh Heupel is trotting Joe Milton out as the starting quarterback for next season. So he's announcing at 1 o'clock today. He had 17 catches this year for 366 yards and a touchdown. I think he could be a very big help for Tennessee. And I know Calhoun is talking about it too. Any slot receiver in Tennessee's offense, I mean, you can't really mess that up.
In retrospect, will we see, and I thought this during the season, and it would have sounded like pure heresy with the numbers he put up, Jalen Hyatt, will we look back and say that he was more of a product of the system or just one of the greatest receivers to ever lace it up at Tennessee?
I really think it'll depend on what he does in the NFL because will his skill set transfer when everybody is the same athleticism as him? And it'll also depend. I mean, he was in a very, 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 very friendly slot receiver offense. So he didn't have much. Everything he caught was basically wide open when he was down the field. So he was getting schemed open. I don't know how much of that he got himself open. You'd have to really dive into that. And I think it'll depend on what he does in pro football.
Okay. Your thoughts, Calhoun?
Yeah, I'm a little more it's a little easier for me. I'm straight system guy. It reminds me of it reminds me of in the 90s, 95, Joey Kent sets the all-time single-season receiving yards record for Tennessee. He breaks his own record in 96, remains the only back-to-back 1,000-yard receiver in Tennessee football history, becomes the all-time careers leader. Marcus Nash, the year after that, breaks Joey Kent's records from 96 and 95. Guys, what was a common thread from 95 to 97?
I don't know. Who was it? Was it Eli? I can't remember.
This guy named Peyton Manning was throwing the ball during that time. None of them became anything in the NFL. After Peyton Manning leaves, Peerless Price becomes the number 1 receiver. Doesn't come close to putting up the numbers Nash or Kent had, and he has the best career in the NFL of all 3 of them. He was the better receiver. He just was never the number 1 receiver when Peyton Manning was throwing him the ball. And so, yeah.
Okay. Let's get back to Cruton here for a second. I got sidetracked. So then we have Oma. I like to use my Boston accent. Norman Lott from Arizona State. Gyro, what can you tell us about him?
So he's another guy that'll be announcing at 4 o'clock today. He's a 6'3", 290-pound defensive tackle. And really with Latrell Bumpus and Byron Young on the way out, if Tennessee lands him, they could just put him on the defensive line today and he'd probably be a starter. I mean, he's a plug-and-play guy. He I don't think he started for Arizona State, but he appeared in 9 games, finished with 14 tackles, and 3 were for loss and a sack. So wherever he lands, he's expected to enroll in spring classes. and he will have 2 years of eligibility remaining. So I think he's a guy that if Josh Heupel and Rodney Gardner pick him up, you could just put him on the defensive line today, and he'd fit right into what Byron Young was.
Okay, let's roll on. And then the three of us are going to you mentioned a fourth. The three kind of threw a curveball at me there, but the three of us are going to pick which one would be the greatest addition for the Vols today. And who knows, they might get three, they might get four. I have a feeling this will be a good day for Tennessee. Just a gut feeling after covering recruiting. It's not transfer portal. It's not exactly the same. Just a weird gut feeling. All right, so Davon Sears, a Texas State transfer, who is kind of just graduated up the ladder from JUCO to Texas State. That doesn't sound very sexy playing at Texas State, but a defensive lineman, Davon Sears. What can you tell us about Sears, who's scheduled to announce?
Yeah, out of high school, he didn't have a lot of hype, so he went JUCO, and now he's at Texas State. He's also announcing at 4 p.m., so I guess 4 could either be really good or really bad, or a mix of both. But he played in all 12 games for Texas State, and he had 15 tackles, and 3.5 were for loss and 1 sack. And coming out of JUCO, he could be an immediate impact guy. So he's another one that I think with Byron Young on the way out, you just put him on the defensive line and he could play tomorrow.
Sorry, go ahead, Jar.
No, I was going to say that while we're talking about defensive linemen, it's also worth noting that Tennessee is bringing in David Hobbs and Tyree Weathersby out of high school. But those guys, probably their bodies are not ready for D1 football. So I feel like if you bring in a Davon Sears or a Norman Lott, you buy those guys a year or two where they can get in shape and get ready for SEC football. Because it's a big jump going from, even though it might be the highest division of Tennessee high school football, it's a massive jump going from Smyrna to Tennessee, or being the number one guy out of North Carolina to Tennessee. So I think they need to land at least one of these guys today, so that way you don't have to rely on a true freshman or even a guy who has no experience that's been on your roster for 2 years.
Okay, and who's the fourth cat you mentioned?
Oh, yeah, John Campbell. So he's an offensive tackle out of Miami, and he started for Miami 18 times, and he was a member of the 2018 class. And for him, it's coming down to Tennessee and Florida, and he's a Florida native. So another thing I wanted to mention with these transfer portal guys is, but with the exception of Davon Sears, a lot of these moves would be lateral. So this guy is going from like Miami to another Power 5 D1 school. So at the end of the day, I feel like it comes down to business decisions. So for John Campbell, would you come to Tennessee and compete in a very deep offensive line now that you have a transfer already coming in? Or would you go to your home school in Florida where their roster's in shambles, like they're having to bring in transfers just to have enough players for next season where you can start immediately? So that's always something I feel like we should mention, is it's a business decision more than these guys. Like Neyland for a high school guy is cool, but these guys are coming from ACC, SEC football. Why would they're not really playing in Neyland over will I play on day one?
No, and I think, Calhoun, I think a lot of the guys that just get wowed by Knoxville or the facilities or that sort of thing, I always have questions about those. I like the guys like Gyro said that are making a business decision. The guys that just get kind of wowed into coming to Tennessee, I think you're always concerned that, they could get wowed somewhere else in a few months. I do think that Gyro, you could help me with this. Who was the offensive lineman that they brought in right before Christmas? I think they could use another offensive lineman in the transfer portal. I don't think they have to have it, Calhoun, because you're not going to go out there in the transfer portal and likely find Darnell Wright, who would be like the Drake May of offensive lineman transfers. I don't think that you're going to find that guy. He's a special athlete, special ability, but you could certainly find a guy that could give you some snaps game in and game out. So let me go with this. I want to end with Gyro because he's been covering this and he knows it as in depth as anybody. But let me start with you, Calhoun. Out of the group that we've got 3, and then the fourth was John Campbell that are announcing today. So we've got an Oregon transfer, and we've got an Oregon transfer and Dante Thornton, wide receiver. We have a defensive line target, Omar Norman Lott from Arizona State, And then we have, I want to call him Aaron Sears, but I'm not going to do that. Davon Sears, Texas State transfer. Out of that group, rank them, Calhoun. Who would you take and why?
So before I start, if the one I want to see the most, it'd be Dante Thornton, because that's like, to me, like Kevin Durant joining Golden State when they already have the best offense in history. Like, that's
I
just
was going to use that.
Really?
Now, I actually was going to use the special team like Kevin Garnett. But anyway, go ahead.
Oh, Kevin Garnett was my favorite player growing up, so I appreciate that too. But yeah, no, like I just that what him and Heupel's offense would be amazing. But as far as needs for Tennessee, I'm gonna go Omar Norman Lott number one. I think they need a defensive lineman more than anything. Norman Lott has comparable stats to Davon Sears while playing at a higher level, so I have more faith in him. I got Sears number 2, and I got Dante Thornton number 3. And just to throw in John Campbell number 4. Also, John Campbell's not committing. He's got 1 year of eligibility. He's not looking to compete for a starting job. I don't think so.
All right. So who are you taking first, Gyro?
I would have to go probably almost the same order. I think Norman Lott would be one, because he's a guy that Tennessee's probably going to land, I would say. Out of the 4, he's probably the most likely. He entered the portal at the end of last spring, and Rodney Gardner called him the next day, and he ended up staying at Arizona State for whatever reason. And then when he entered the portal this go around, Rodney Gardner was also his first call, and Tennessee was his first offer. So there's obviously mutual interest there. And even with Tennessee's defensive line this year, I would not say they played well for most of the season. I mean, they had games like Pitt where they showed out that they could be a good defensive line. And then you had games like South Carolina where Spencer Rattler could have made a sandwich in the pocket, like if he wanted to. Nobody was back there. So I think he would probably be the biggest priority, and I think they will end up landing him of the 4. I feel like he's the most probable. And then I would have Dante Thornton too, because you have Squirrel White, who showed potential, and then you have Ramel Keaton. But Dante Thornton has played at this level and had success. And I feel like his versatility in Josh Heupel's offense could give them a lot of leeway if, God forbid, next season you have a Cedric Tillman situation where somebody twists an ankle and they're out for 2 or 3 weeks. You can put Thornton outside and maybe put Squirrel in the slot, or vice versa. So I feel like he would be the flashiest pickup, and obviously would get some momentum for Tennessee. And then third, I would say Sears, for the same reason as before with defense, and just he never played at a Power 5 level, which kind of scares me, because he would have to come to Tennessee, and it's different football going from Texas State to the SEC. And then like Calhoun said, I don't think Campbell is going to want to compete for a spot. I said it earlier. For him, it's more of a business decision. And if he went to Florida with their roster turnover and whatever they have going on in Gainesville, he would be the guy tomorrow on that offensive line. So that would be my order.
I want to go with Calhoun, and I want to take the adding Durant thing with Dante Thornton. I do, but I'm going to be a trenches guy, and I'm going to say Omar Norman Lott would be the guy. And yeah, this one's, I guess, a little bit difficult because I like Davon Sears as well, but with Norman Lott, you've got a guy that has played at the FBS or FBS level, Division I. So I'm going to go with him. I would say Dante Thornton second. Guys, that when we really look at this roster, and this sounds bizarre in this system, and I do think they can get people open, even if it's Gyro out there running routes. But there's some questions about depth, isn't there, at receiver, which is something you don't want to hear, especially Gyro mentioned Tillman. If something like that were to happen, who are Tennessee's top 3 receivers? Calhoun, that would be a bit of a question. It wasn't a question last year. You would immediately turn to Keaton or Squirrel White. We kind of knew going into the year. I don't think we know right now who that would be.
Maybe in the slot, because you're right. Everybody in the slot transferred out because they knew they weren't going to beat out Squirrel White. But honestly, with wideout, I mean, we're forgetting there are some young wideouts that, I mean, Chaz Nimrod and Caleb Webb, I mean, they're going to be, I think they're going to be starting in 2 years. So it's like, I don't know. It's such a plug and play system. The Heupel system with receivers, and so I don't. As long as they got enough speed and size, I don't think you have to be that good to rack up a lot of yards as a receiver in Heupel system.
No, I can see that. I think that the thing that made Jalen Hyatt so special is he was so incredibly fast. He probably, as an overall talent, is third in Tennessee's team last year. I know Brew McCoy is the best talent from all the coaches and that I've talked to, and some scouts as well. I really believe that Cedric Tillman's second. We didn't see the development of him, and I wonder how it's kind of odd how he fit into this offense or didn't fit into this offense. So I wonder if I don't know, maybe issues with teamsmanship. But Jalen Hyatt, as far as a talent headed into the NFL, guys, he's third best on this team last year. And so Jalen Hyatt was able to maximize his production because of his speed. I think the question you have to ask yourself, can Squirrel White do the same thing based off his shiftiness? Maybe as fast, but I don't think so. But Squirrel White, I think, is going to have a great year. Assuming these guys are healthy, those are your three. And then you have Jacob Warren coming back as the tight end. I think you're in great shape. But after that, I kind of wonder who is the next guy to step up. The other thing you have to keep in mind, Calhoun, is this team has apparently, based on all of last season, bought in. So I don't think you're going to have to wait for a guy to come along like you did Jalen Hyatt, who was a no-show in 2021.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think they all have balled in. Anybody that's transferred is definitely going to be somebody who's balled in too. So I think they're – and again, Caleb Webb and Chaz Nimrod committed after the 2021 season, so they had enough evidence to buy in. So, yeah, I think Tennessee's going to be fine no matter what. Heupel showed at Missouri, if he has to, he'll use two tight ends and you make his tight end his go-to target. My mind is drawing a blank. Who was the tight end at Missouri when he was there? Had a really
remember that one.
I'm sorry?
I'm going to let you remember that
one. Had a really long last name that was hard to pronounce. But well.
You think about it. I'll make something up. Oh, Elias, by the way, says don't trust McCoy to be a primary, frankly. That surprises me because I do. I think he's going to be really good. Vols Time says McCoy could be a good tight end. Whoa. He's not that big. Easy, guys.
I want to pose a question. So you talk about having Squirrel White, Ramel Keaton, and Brew McCoy as your three next season. So if you're Thornton, he visited Miami, which Mario Cristobal recruited him to Oregon. Now he's trying to recruit him to Miami. And then he visited Auburn and Arkansas as well. So if you're Thornton and you're looking for a place where you're a day one starter, does having those three receivers at Tennessee deter you from thinking about Knoxville as much?
Let me play pro and con if I'm in his head. Pro, they showed that they could plug somebody in quickly when Tillman went down, and they were able to get a Ramel Keaton out there and making plays. Con, yes. I would look at this and I would wonder, am I going to start over McCoy or Keaton because they have a head start? Calhoun, thoughts? Or are you looking for that Missouri tight end?
Sorry, I was looking straight for I was knee deep looking for the Missouri tight end. Okay, so you were talking about the issues with Dante Thornton and the concept of depth, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's something for him to worry about. I think that, more than anything, that there might come a time where I don't think we're there yet. I think there might come a time 2 or 3 years down the road where the draft stock of Tennessee receivers start to fall when people start seeing that everybody who plays at Tennessee is picking up those yards. Didn't that happen with Florida quarterbacks under Spurrier? Didn't eventually NFL scouts be like, oh my gosh, they're just all putting up these yards, so let's just stop wasting top first round picks on them because doing it under Spurrier doesn't mean anything.
No, I think that was the case. I think scouting, the money's so big now that I think scouting's better. I don't even think it takes a learning curve nowadays. I think they see you and your shiftiness or lack thereof and what you're able to do in the combine and all of that. And if you're wide open, I go back to the Danny Werfel thing in the 90s. I mean, the guy was throwing balls to wide open dudes. And that doesn't mean that he should be an NFL player. I would say the same thing about Tim Tebow to a lesser extent. Great recruiting coverage, Gyro. So we certainly appreciate it. And we will talk to you soon. Follow him at offthehooksports.com. And what's that Twitter handle, Gyro?
For who?
Me? You.
Oh, Caleb Gyro 16. So my name and 1-6.
Because he's a huge Peyton Manning fan.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Or Trevor Lawrence.
Or Trevor, definitely. Who still has the most gorgeous hair. Just gorgeous. I would get really tired of that hair. I'm trying the beard thing like Calhoun, but I don't know that that's lasting much longer, like as of 1 o'clock today. Gyro, have a great day. Thank you, sir.
All right, I'll see y'all later.
Continue the great work. Recruiting coverage today brought to you by AndyMasonRealEstate.com. AndyMasonRealEstate.com is where you need to go if you're even thinking about buying or selling a home in the Knoxville area. Why? Because Andy Mason has over 40 years of experience, he and his group, and they also have 2 business tenants, which are really, really important. That's number 1, they are going to give you the best service. Number 2, the best prices. Huh? How about that? That's pretty easy. AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Joshua Dobbs, I think we all fell in love with him a little bit over this last couple of games with the Tennessee Titans, even the national media to some extent. Did he ever have a chance with Caleb Calhoun? I'm Dave Hooker, Off the Hook Sports.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center. Ah.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Hey folks, Gary Viles here, Viles Automotive on Callahan Drive. I've been selling cars here in East Tennessee for 27 years. In that time, I've come to realize it's not about the car. It's about you, the customer. So I'm here to take care of you just like family. Good credit, bad credit, you name it, we can get you taken care of. If we don't have it, we can find it for you. We go across the country to get any vehicle that you want. And here at Viles Automotive, we don't believe in fake numbers. We just give you great deals. And as always, we want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Chattanooga, we're at it again. For the 5th year in a row, you voted us best of the best criminal and DUI law firm.
And finalist for best law firm and best personal injury firm.
Thank you for the love, Chattanooga. We won't let you down.
Here we go with Caleb Calhoun. I am Dave Hooker. We're going to get to Josh Dobbs here momentarily. First of all, Caleb Calhoun, I want to get your thoughts of the Joey Halzle officially promoted to offensive coordinator. I didn't think it was a great surprise. I want to get your thoughts. I want to remind everyone to hit that thumbs up button, like it, so we can bring people in via our YouTube channel and more. And be sure and hit share. You can always retweet that. We greatly appreciate it. This Halzle breakdown is brought to you in part by Craft Treats. Go to crafttreats.com. Don't forget about those chill pills. The chill pills will help your pet with digestive issues, or also they've got the arthritis medication that'll help, all in the chill pills, and anxiety as well. And just go to crafttreats.com. That's crafttreats.com. And for any of their products, you can use the promo code Off the Hook for 20% off. That's Off the Hook for 20% off. Calhoun, I wasn't surprised, neither were you, that Joey Halzle was promoted to offensive coordinator. What did you make of the move? How does it work for Tennessee? Just overall, your thoughts.
Before that, Albert Okwuegbunam was the tight end from Missouri. Had 11 touchdown catches in 2017.
Fantastic. I was on pins and needles waiting for that.
Okay, so Yeah, I don't think it's much of a surprise, Joey Halzle. One of the big things is I always feel like you want your offensive coordinator to be your quarterback's coach, so that's kind of an advantage Halzle might bring to the table that Golich didn't bring. Doesn't really matter too much. You wrote about it. Play calling's kind of overrated. Halsey's not going to handle play calling duties this year as he kind of studies a little more under Heupel. I think that's fine. I think what really stands out is Heupel has so much faith in his offense and his system. This is the second straight year he's promoted from within to deal with the staff change. I think that, and I don't think it's a loyalty thing. I think Heupel sits up there and says, I'd rather have continuity because I know my offense and I know what I can do and I know what we can do with this offense. And so I think that's the real story. I'll have a couple of posts later today about Tennessee still has a vacancy now, and that's at the tight ends position. Who's going to coach the tight ends? Dave, I think the tight ends coach, they're just going to find a recruiter, aren't they?
Yeah, I think there are two positions particularly that you can just find a recruiter, and one is running back. I mean, let's face it, run to green. That's basically the way to teach a running back how to run. Either he can do it or he can't. By the way, I'm in the middle of the Bo Jackson book by Jeff Pearlman. Phenomenal. Bo Jackson was a real jerk when he was a kid. But anyway, so you teach run to green, and then you teach pass protection. And it's pretty much as simple as that. And Tennessee's pass protection scheme is not difficult. I think that you could say the half of the same for the tight end position. I think that you teach pass protection, which is a lot of shielding, and I don't think that difficult. Now, you do have to run routes much more often than a running back. But could you theoretically put a recruiter there? Yeah, definitely. Now, I think you want somebody that's competent. Don't get me wrong. And I don't want to necessarily make this comparison because it's going to maybe sound a little rough, but Rodney Garner is a great, great, great recruiter, right? Okay. Right. He's not a great, 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 great defensive line coach. Okay. And I've seen it go the other way. You know, I've seen great, great, great position coaches not be able to recruit, and then that's an issue. So don't get me wrong. No slight against Rodney Garner, but if you can have that recruiting ability and an above average defensive line coach, which I think he is, I think that's ultimately what you're shooting for. But if you have to lean towards one or the other at the tight end position, as far as that coach, I would lean towards, hey, go out and get the best recruiter you possibly can. You?
Yeah, absolutely. I think almost all position coaches outside of quarterback and offensive line, I'd rather them be recruiters than position coaches. Maybe secondary, but back into the defense, but offensive line and quarterback are the two where I think I think those are the two where being able to coach outweighs recruiting abilities at the position.
See, I think if they could find a Rodney Garner that type to coach tight ends, that's perfect. Because it was Nick Saban who said, I want the young guy who has innovative ideas. These are the type of people I hire. I want the young guy who has innovative ideas, or I want the older guy who's proven that he can do it over a long period of time. That's what he wants. So you've got a pretty young staff. Okay, so if you have an older coach that has proven that he can recruit and still grind, because it is a grind, how many contacts does he have at different schools that he can say, hey, Joey Halzle, or any of the coaches for that matter, not just on the offensive side, it's mostly a younger staff. He can say, I know Bob down at Ocala High School. Let me give him a call to get us in the door. That's the type of coach that I would hire. And again, this all has to fit in place. You don't want a dolt as far as X's and O's. But if you've got a guy that can go out there and bring you recruiting connections and he's an older coach, I think there's a fit there. I don't know that that's the demo that Josh Heupel's looking for, but that's where I would tend to lean. Travis brings up Trooper Taylor. I did not. Suddenly, Troop and I are a little bit older. I would completely give Trooper Taylor a call, and I would. There is no question in my mind. He's coached passing trees with receivers. He's coached blocking schemes with running backs. There is no question that Trooper, in my mind, is thought of as a great recruiter, but is underrated as an X's and O's coach. If you can get Troop, I'd get Troop. He was at Duke a couple years ago, and yeah, I think that would be a great hire. But I didn't want to sound like I was old guy. What would you think of that, Caleb? I'm sure you've seen Trooper from afar.
Yeah, no, I would love the hire of Trooper. He coached running backs for 2 years at Tennessee and kind of restored the Tennessee run game in 04 and 05. And then he went right to receiver. And Robert Meacham set the single season record for receiving yards in 06. You and I know the whole offensive coordinator situation in 07, 08. Trooper left thinking he was going to get the job. Fulmer went out and hired Dave Clawson. That was the hire that did Fulmer in. So yeah, it's Trooper ended up saying he was lied to by Mike Gundy, but yeah, I think Trooper would be great at Tennessee as a tight ends coach.
Yeah, I would go hire him as soon as I possibly could. Now, the thing about Trooper is, I don't know if it's a sexy hire anymore. I think when Oklahoma State made that hire, it was a sexy hire. And then what you have to remember is Trooper went to Arkansas State for a couple of different reasons. One, his son was playing there. He wanted to coach his son. His wife was also getting, I believe, her doctorate there. So that's why he stayed at Arkansas State as long as he did. Now, I think when you have that, you go from Tennessee and Oklahoma State down to Arkansas State, people look at it like, oh, are you like the assistant Butch Jones? I don't think Trooper is that. I think that Trooper has a lot left in the tank if he wants to do that and would be a great pickup. And somebody's going to pick him up now that his son's out of college, and somebody's going to pick him up and they're going to be blown away by what they get out of him. I believe that. And I haven't talked to him in a number of years, but I do believe that will be the case. So we'll see. I don't know of a coach out there that is necessarily interested in the position, but why wouldn't you want to coach at Tennessee right now? You're definitely trending upwards. Worst case scenario, if Josh Heupel turns into Butch Jones, you've got 3 years because of the success he's had. You have that sort of equity as a head and assistant coach. So why wouldn't you want to coach at Tennessee?
Oh yeah, I agree. It's, you definitely have a chance to climb the ladder too. He'll promote from within, and there's a chance to build your resume. So I'm with you on all of that to see how it goes.
Check out Big Orange Philly. They're in North Knoxville on Maynardville Pike. Great food, family friendly, whether you're watching the national championship game tonight or the NFL. Big Orange Phillies is the place to be. They've got billiards. They've got also they got darts. They got everything. But the food is fantastic, and it's family friendly on Maynardville Pike, close to Maynardville and close to North Knoxville. It's Big Orange Phillies. Speaking of the NFL, I think a lot of our listeners and viewers got into Joshua Dobbs over the weekend. I know the national media did as well, Caleb. It was a good story. First start a couple of weeks ago. What was it, 11 days ago or whatever it was? And he comes out, and you tweeted out, and I completely agree, he was handcuffed by the Titans coaching staff. And that's very frustrating. Before we get to that, kudos just to Joshua Dobbs as a former Vol, as a VFL. I really hate that term, to be quite frank with you, because Derek Dooley made it up. But anyway, we'll use it. Kudos to him, man, who goes 6 years in the NFL and just keeps chopping wood, as Kirby Smart says, or pulling the rope, as Butch Jones said at Cincinnati? Who keeps doing that, holding a clipboard in their hand and waiting for their opportunity? I mean, what a great young man. And if you look at Tennessee, how blessed have they been with the Hendon Hookers of the world and the Joshua Dobbs of the world. It seems as if they've had a good run of guys that are just good dudes, and that's not always the case.
Yeah, and because, you hate to say this because it's because Hendon Hooker got hurt, but Josh Dobbs still has the second most productive total offensive season in Tennessee football history, 2016, only to that 1997 Peyton Manning year. And so that's a real testament to him. You're right. He's been stuck with bad coaching at college, in the pros. We always knew he was going to be successful, whatever he did. Whether it be a backup quarterback, starting quarterback, or going to space. And so is the air and space engineer. Yeah, he was handcuffed on Saturday. I think the problem, and I've been a very big Todd Downing critic, I still don't know how you get a DUI from like a Thursday night game landing into Nashville at 2:30 Friday morning, and they don't allow drinks on the plane, but only Todd Downing could. And ever since that DUI, he hasn't won a game since. He was trying to stick with the same offense that Ryan Tannehill ran. And Josh Dobbs is not Ryan Tannehill. You know this. He doesn't have the same type of arm. Your best move with Dobbs was to keep him in shotgun and keep the threat of him running the ball. You got to run with him maybe 4 or 5 times, at least a quarter, to like keep defenses honest. And I don't think there was one first down called run for Josh Dobbs until the 22nd first down that Tennessee had in that game. And just complete lack of understanding of how to use Dobbs compared to how to use Tannehill. And it's a really pathetic sight when Butch Jones knew how to use Josh Dobbs better than Todd Downing. So
Joshua Dobbs 3 years from now will be, or let's just say next year. Joshua Dobbs next year will be starter for the Titans, backup for the Titans, or on another team.
I'm going backup for the Titans. I don't mind. Look, when Tannehill's healthy, he's the better quarterback. And people forget the Titans were so wrecked on the offensive line this year, which was why it was also stupid to run the same offense with Dobbs at the end of the year, because you probably need to do more quick releases and design RPOs, because that's the only way to keep a defensive line honest if you don't have an offensive line. And so, but I think fully healthy, you stick with Tannehill in this offense.
Hit the thumbs up button, the like button, and we greatly appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed yet, you need to do that immediately. Vols Automotive Group on Callahan, the center of car shopping in Knoxville. Vols Automotive Group is phenomenal, and Vols Automotive Group can handle the financing. They can keep you going with their service department that they know that is fair. Everybody that we endorse, which is what I love about Off the Hook Sports, is everybody we endorse, we've either done business with or we would if we need their services. So give them a fantastic endorsement. Vols said, how about Jason Witten as a tight end coach? Well, Jason is a coach right now. He's a high school coach, which means he doesn't have to recruit. Jason is also a multi-millionaire, which means he doesn't have to recruit. So I don't know that there's a lot of millionaires out there with a cush job that they enjoy. I'm not saying cush as he gets tons of financial incentives for being a coach. They're underpaid, and it gripes me to this day. But I don't know if there's a bunch of millionaires out there running around enjoying life that would suddenly want to be on a plane at Friday night, 11 p.m., Caleb, flying to a game at LSU because they had to recruit a kid in Loganville, Georgia. I don't know there's a lot of those guys around.
Yeah, unless they're trying to climb the ladder to become a head coach at the college level, like, why do you want to be a career assistant coach recruiter? I mean, again, and by the way, the multimillionaires that have been hired as head coaches, Deion Sanders, Penny Hardaway in basketball, they're hired right out of coaching high school. They're not coaching positions in college and recruiting.
Well, and Jay, if I'm correct, he'd be 42-ish right now.
Yeah.
He's about 6 years younger than me. So I don't think that he's going to want to start to climb the coaching ladder in college. So I don't see that. I like to hear it. But I think Jason's a fantastic dude. And by the way, quick riff. Goodness gracious. The Deion thing, prime time, I was bought in. I was in it. I was watching everyone. Okay. And then here's what happened. I get about 2.5 episodes deep, and they've got a bunch of reporters standing next to him during practice, which doesn't happen, everyone. You don't stand next to the coach at practice. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. It was so orchestrated and stilted for TV, it was ridiculous. That's first. Second, the reporters, the supposed reporters that were supposed to be there, had the exact same notebooks, and they weren't the notepads that you put in your back pocket like everybody uses. They were big, thick notebooks, and they had just been opened, you could tell, for the first time, and they're the same ones. It was totally for TV. It was like reality TV, the Kardashians, except it was Deion Sanders. The next one is they're standing there talking to the coach during practice. Again, never happens. And they go, how about number 7? How about number 13? I'd never, ever in my life ask a coach about one of his players using the number. I would say, how about Landon? Or how about that guy? Or how about Squirrel? You wouldn't go number 10, 8, 14, 92. They lost me. That's it. I'm done with the primetime series. Have you watched any of it?
I haven't watched any of it. I thought it was ridiculous from the start to do something like that.
It's gotten worse. It was okay in the beginning.
Reminds me of, 2005, when Tennessee went 5-6 after starting number 3, the coaches invited ESPN for some random practice session. It was the most fake stage thing I ever saw. And Fulmer later admitted he was worried that Tennessee would get the Auburn treatment from the year before, going undefeated and being left out of the title game. And so he went out of his way to promote Tennessee. And I'm like, maybe you should have gone out of your way to make sure your offensive line was staying in shape in the offseason.
So, you want to hear a funny, true story about that practice?
Sure.
Okay, so it's supposed to be an ESPN only practice. I heard that. I was on the air in Knoxville and I was writing for the News Sentinel. I thought, well, that's bull. You can't let some media in and not others. So I just went over there and called back into the radio station and started reporting from practice. And let's say former sports information director Bud Ford was not too pleased with that. And I think the last words were shut it down, shut this broadcast down. I was reminded of that by a John Knowles, who's our producer at the time. Check out Zool Beer Company, zoolbeer.com. Fantastic parking right there in downtown Knoxville. You don't hear that a lot. And worldwide award-winning craft beer, zoolbeer.com. You will love them. Always want to say thank you to Bassey Lawn and Garden, Man Alive, It's Worth the Drive, and City Heating and Air Conditioning. Integrity matters. Have a fantastic day, everyone. For Caleb Gyro, he's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. We'll talk to you weekdays at 10 o'clock off the